You're listening to the Small Business Talk podcast with Cathy Smith, episode 25.
Small Business Talk is a podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs who want a better way to run their businesses without spending years doing it the hard way. Discover tips and techniques that you can use to take your business to the next level. Enjoy episodes with our guest experts along with deeper dives into tools and tips that you can use in your business. Learn about building your social media channels, how to get Google to love your website, developing a digital marketing strategy, and tools to make your life and business easier, plus much more. Whether you're a small business owner, a seasoned entrepreneur, or just beginning a business journey, Small Business Talk is hosted by Cathy Smith, who has run the same marketing agency for more than 17 years and helped hundreds of business owners achieve their marketing goals.
Today, my guest is Laurie Wright from lauriewriter.com. Welcome, Laurie.
Thanks so much, Cathy. Thanks for having me here.
We know lots of people have books in their heads and not quite sure where to start, and then will somebody actually buy it? So if you could give us a little bit of background about who you are and why you're here, and then we'll get into our topic.
For sure. So I actually started the opposite of business. I was a kindergarten teacher for 10 years, and I wrote a book inspired by my students over 12 years ago now. After I started having kids, I wasn't able to do it all anymore, at least not to do it all well. So I made the decision to stay at home with the children. And after being at home for about 8 years, I was bored, as many moms are. And I looked around for some, intellectual and creative stimulation. So my first sort of venture into business, because I had, no experience, was what we call a direct sales company, or in the States, they say MLMs. I'm not sure in Australia if you have other names for that.
Yeah, we either call them direct selling or MLMs both. So,
okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, okay, so I did that for about a year and a half. And what that did was really open my eyes to how much the internet had progressed since I had stopped working. Really, I was only using Facebook and email and maybe the odd, Google search. And Amazon, of course, always. But I didn't realize, all the possibilities that were out there. So it really opened my eyes to things like the email marketing, and the platforms that make it so easy for you. And of course, also the self-publishing platform on Amazon. And so that's how that all got started, is I revisited the book that I had written 10 years prior. And I just did as much research and learning as I could online to figure out how to do it. And so at the time, figuring out how to actually publish is what seemed like the hard part. And then after I published, I realized that actually selling your books is what is the hard part.
I think that's so true, isn't it? Because there's so many books out there that your mother, your grandmother, and maybe your husband or your wife have bought, and that's about it. But to actually be an author, you really need to sell to people you don't know.
Yes, exactly. With 8 million books on Amazon and 80% of online sales going through Amazon, it's hard to find one book in that haystack, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's such a noisy marketplace, so you do really need to stand out. So can you sort of give us a few tips on how to publish a book?
Yeah, so there's a platform on Amazon. It's kdp.amazon.com. You need, your PDF files of your book. You need to have it formatted. So there's lots of programs out there that do that, or people you can hire to do it fairly cheaply. And you just upload your files. So you have a cover file separate than the interior. And it's as easy as filling in some keywords and your title and the author and all that kind of stuff. You need an ISBN, of course, and you press publish. So, as overwhelming as it is mentally, it's really not a difficult process. So one of the things probably people would find most difficult is what to do for a cover. So for a business book, you're not really looking at artwork, but you do need a cover, and not everybody is able to design that themselves. So my first tip would be go to the category where you think your book would be, so nonfiction and then whatever, you talk about, and look at similar covers. So a lot of people have this idea that the more unique, the better, because it will stand out. But actually, you really want your cover to fit in, because that makes it look like all the other traditionally published books. And if your book cover stands out and it doesn't stand out in a good way, people will bypass it. People will only give things attention for a few weeks.
So we definitely like the familiar.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Okay, perfect. Where would we go to get an ISBN? Is there services that we can do to do that?
Yeah, whatever country you're in, you need an ISBN from your country. So, for example, in Canada, they're free. In the States, they're not free. I don't know about Australia. I'm sorry. But just do a Google search ISBN and your country, wherever your listeners are, and they'll find it. Half your listeners are in America, so they need to go to Bowker, Bowker, and unfortunately they're not free like they are for Canadians. They are quite pricey, but there are sales once or twice a year.
Perfect. And I do believe that they are paid in Australia as well. You just need to Google that and check that out. You need to be getting an ISBN in your country of publish as opposed to where you want to sell it.
Exactly. So, for example, I'm in Canada, but I'm the publisher, so the publisher needs an ISBN where they are. So I have the ISBN from Canada, even though I sell through Amazon.com and actually a few other Amazons as well. So the country where the publisher is.
Okay, perfect. We've got our PDF sorted and we've loaded it up. So I guess we've kind of jumped the card a bit because we're talking about publish when we haven't actually got our book yet. What would be your first suggestions of, okay, I've got this book in my head, I'm really keen to do something with it, how do I get it out?
I recommend market research on Amazon, honestly. So you have your idea of your topic, but maybe what you don't have is your subtopics or your chapters. You have some idea, but when in the first place, when you're brainstorming, you want to make sure you cover all the information. Go to Amazon, go to similar books, and look at the reviews. So especially, the number one, maybe the top 10 books in the category where you think yours will go, look at the reviews and see what they say as far as, I wish the author would have covered, or I wish the author would have been more specific about, or this author of this book did a fantastic job on this topic that I haven't seen done before. So look for things that stand out like that, and that's what you want to make sure you include in your book.
Oh, that's great. I love those tips. So basically get their book and do it better.
Yeah. I know it's a little sneaky, isn't it?
I think that's perfect, and it sounds like a very good place to start.
Yeah.
We've done our research. We've decided that we're going to write this book. How do we actually write it? Do we pull up a Word document or something similar to that, or what do we do?
Well, I guess that's every writer's preference. I am now a Google Docs fan because it's so easy to share and to have other people edit. It's just really made my life easy and the life of my students. They just can share a link with me and I can really easily edit the work. So I would recommend Google Docs. Some people are diehard Word fans and the new Pages and the new MacBook Airs has changed things up a little bit. But I would say just start writing. And the hard part for writers of all kinds is writing, is butt in chair, all the distractions turned off or put away. It doesn't matter if the house is dirty. It doesn't matter what's going on. The hardest part is to sit down and write. And I think it's the same nonfiction and fiction. If you have an hour to write, half of that hour might be spent staring at the wall. And then the ideas will start coming and your fingers will start flying over the keyboard. And that's what we call flow. And it will really flow out of you. I feel like you need to be in that mental space where you can do some deeper work. So you can't have Facebook and emails going. You can't have your phone next to you blinking with notifications. You really have to moderate your surroundings and focus on what you're doing and be okay with that staring at the screen, staring at the wall for a good chunk of time, because it does take that time often to get the ideas to start coming.
That's great advice, being comfortable with that uncomfortable. So would you suggest starting down with just brainstorming and putting all your ideas after you've done your research and just get something on paper to start with?
I would for sure. I think it would help if you're talking nonfiction. It would really help to have the ideas of your topics and subtopics and do as much brainstorming about, if it's going to be 10 chapters, what are they going to be about, or what subtopics are going to be in each chapter, all that kind of stuff. As much as you can, get it all, dump it out as much as you can so you don't forget any of it. And then you can go back and start to fill in each topic, each subtopic and that. And then you have to edit.
So with editing, would you then suggest to get somebody else to do the edits for you?
I think it would certainly be easier, but if money is an issue, then you might be more inclined to trade your time instead of your money. And there's some tactics you can use. So you can self-edit. Pretty much everybody will scream at you that you need to hire an editor. And of course, that would be the first choice, is to hire a professional to do the job that they've trained and that they do. But money is a real issue for a lot of people. You can't skip the editing whether or not you have the money. But if you don't have the money, you can self-edit. So you just make a plan for it. And so the first time you sit down, you're editing for comprehension. So you edit for readability, you edit your spelling, you edit your grammar, any sort of roadblocks that somebody as they're reading would get to and stop. So anything that doesn't make sense or a spelling mistake will pull us out of our reading, right? Or a big glaring grammar mistake. So that's your first round of edits that you can do yourself. It's time consuming and your eyes go, a little bit wacky. So it can help to play with your document size. So you can either make your document really wide or really skinny, and just looking at the words differently does help you to see it differently.
Absolutely. Years ago, when I was an apprentice, I worked for a newspaper. The proofreaders there actually read things backwards so that they weren't reading it per se. They were just picking up whether the words were spelt correctly or not. So that was a tip that I remember from a long time ago.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, that one would work too. That would make it more interesting too as you go through for the 5th or 10th time. Yeah.
It probably messes with your brain a bit, but you would see whether there were spelling mistakes or not.
It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah. I would say go through and write for interest's sake. So now you should have cropped out a lot of filler words that you don't need. You just end up writing how you think, so a lot more words come down than need to be. But the second edit, I recommend make it as interesting as possible, right? So you end a chapter on a really interesting sentence. You begin a chapter on a really interesting sentence. So we call these hooks. And it's just to get people to keep reading. So even though it's nonfiction, the ultimate goal is you want people to read your book.
And get to the end of the book.
And get to the end of the book and fall in love with the author, right?
Perfect.
Just when you're editing for interest, you want to think about writing things. If you have a series of 2 words, a series of 3 is always better. Instead of using like very fast, very slow, you just want to try to use your thesaurus and make it more interesting. Use better words. Use interesting words.
That's great. Love that. So when you're writing the chapters, do you need to write them in order? So you said that you need a hook at the end of the previous chapter for the next chapter. Do you need to actually write a nonfiction book in the chapter order?
I don't think so, no. It might be good to follow the advice of, what's that book, the Eat the Frog book? Might be good to write the chapters, the one you want to write the least, write it first so that it gets done, and then all the other ones will be easier. You can always go back and add that hook in when you're editing.
Okay, that's excellent advice. I like that. Once you've got the hardest out of the way, then everything's smooth sailing from there. Perfect.
Fingers crossed, anyway.
Okay, so we've taken our time. We've been happy with sitting there in the uncomfortable silence until we can get something to happen. We're writing our worst chapter first, and we might end up going back and redoing that at the end. Okay, so what do we do now? What's your suggestions to keep moving forward?
I highly recommend beta readers. So beta readers might be your friends, or if you already have a Facebook group, maybe some raving fans or anybody that's willing to read the book for you and give you some feedback. So often beta readers will find spelling mistakes that you missed, or they might pull out one section or even one sentence, or maybe even your chapter arrangement. They might call that into question. Actually, this would make more sense, something like that. And beta readers are so beneficial, so helpful. They're worth their weight in gold. But you do have to search around for them. So, your first book, if you're new to business, maybe that's going to be your mom and your sister and your best friend. But if you have a bit of a following and you put out the call for, 10 readers and you make it specific, I'm looking for 10 readers who can read my book in this time frame. So maybe it's 2 weeks because you don't want it to go on forever, and give me some honest feedback. And then if you can ask specific questions for them. So which chapter was your favorite, or would you reorder them, or did it make sense, just depending on the business. That will help the beta readers to know what you want rather than just, it was a great book, or, it was interesting, right?
Excellent. Yeah, asking them the specific questions. So we've sent it out to our beta readers. We've got our feedback. So obviously that's another round of edits. So we've done our however many round of edits we're up to now. And then what do we do now?
So I would say hire a cover designer, because they will be the best, and that is money well spent. If your cover stands out in a bad way, then nobody's going to look at your book. If you don't have the money for that, then I would do some research and try to figure out what you want it to look like and how you can do it, either in Photoshop or Canva or, a free program. You can certainly use those to do one and to try to get it really similar to the top selling books in your category. You do need to format your books, which means, do you want the new chapter to always start on the right-hand side? And do you want the page numbers at the bottom or no page numbers? Do you want headers or footers or whatnot? So depending on your time, people don't usually charge a crazy amount of money to format the books. So this is a really good place to spend some money and have this done for you, because it can be really frustrating to meet the requirements of KDP. And remember in Word, you add a line break or something, and like the whole document changes and shifts, and you don't know what you did or how to get it back. So it can be really frustrating. So this is a good place to spend money for sure.
Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? We've just about finalised the assignment or the submission or the blog post or whatever it happens to be, and you just hit one last thing and all the formatting goes crazy, and like I say, you don't know why or where or how. So, and of course there's lots of very cheap services that could do that. Yeah, even with your cover, Canva's a perfect place to go if you can't outsource that to somebody. Love that. We've basically got our PDF formatted and we're sent off to Amazon. The Amazon service, does that have a set of guidelines that you have to follow?
Yeah, and it's in there, really easy to search depending on what size you want your book to be. They'll give you the guidelines, and you can give that to your formatter.
Excellent. We've got our book sorted and we've got it ready to load to Amazon. Are we just making a Kindle book at this stage, or is it a on-demand hard copy book as well?
A lot of authors think they will only do an ebook and there's no point to the paperback. And from what I've seen, they're often proven wrong. I think it's better to have it in as many versions as you can, because people like to consume information in different ways. So there's a lot of people who read on their devices, but there's still a lot of people who prefer a real life book. And if your book is going to be something that people want to highlight or make notes or, crease the pages or whatnot, then I definitely think it's worth your time. It doesn't take very much energy. It's almost the same files, just to do them both. And so your formatter can do both for you, the paperback and the ebook version. And I definitely think that's in everyone's best interest.
I'm actually finding a lot of people are going back to actually having that physical book that they can highlight and hang on to, and especially in today's noisy world where people are saying you really do need to get off your devices and stop so that you're not interrupting your sleep. An actual physical book doesn't flash in your face and all of that if you're in bed reading. Paperbacks and physical books are becoming more popular again.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got our book, whether it be Kindle or our physical paperback. Obviously, we've printed off a few for ourselves to give to our beta readers and to promotional. So how do we actually get this book to sell?
So your first step is to ask anybody who's read it, the beta readers, your mom, your dad, whoever, to leave a review. The magic number that I've seen for reviews where it makes a difference is 10 reviews. It's not, set in stone. Amazon doesn't actually promote that information or publish that information anywhere. Some people say it's 100, some people say it's 50. I have 10 books published, and for me, the magic number is 10. It can be really hard to get reviews, and the best advice I have is you have to ask. So once a week on your social media, if you just make a post, make it really easy for people so you can offer the link to it and make it really obvious why. Hello, everybody. I'm looking for some honest reviews today. And the reason why is because more reviews boost my visibility on Amazon. And you can go so far as to say there's over 8 million books on Amazon, and visibility is a huge, huge issue when you're trying to sell the book. So if people are honest with their followers and their fans, or even in their email newsletters, they can offer a free, PDF, free ebook version, and not in exchange for a review, because you can't offer that. But here I'm going to give this, and wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'd really appreciate a review. You have to be consistent with asking for them. So if you put it in your scheduled posts once a week, or your scheduled emails, once a month, then pretty shortly, within a few months, you should definitely have your 10 reviews.
Okay, perfect. That was something I was going to ask. If you give somebody a free book, they actually need to disclose that in the review, that they did do a review in exchange for a book. So I guess that's the way around it, is saying, here's my book for you to have a look at, and if you wouldn't mind doing a review.
Exactly. And when people start saying, I read your book, it was fantastic, a lot of authors say, oh, why, thank you. I'm so glad you like it. So use that as an opportunity to say, thank you. It would really help if you could write that down on Amazon on a review. And, it's awkward, and a lot of times we don't like to do that ask, but people are very happy to help us if we tell them how they can help us. Just have to swallow the pride a little bit, and instead of just saying thank you, say thank you, and can you review it?
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Sometimes we just need to ask people. They don't realise how they can help us or what to do. I've had the same with the podcast, as people have said, I really like the podcast. So then I've been able to say, yeah, if you could leave me a review on iTunes, that would be wonderful. So yes. Excellent. So we've got our book up, we've got our 10 reviews. Obviously, we should be incorporating it into a social media campaign. Is there anything else you suggest we should be doing to sell our book?
One of the most important things that authors can do to sell their book that they don't realize is when you write the book description on the Amazon page. So it's called your book page. You have your book cover. Sometimes there's some interior pages, and then there's a description. A lot of people have a wall of text there. They repeat whatever it was they wrote on the back of the book, and it's not interesting to read. So nothing will make somebody click away faster than having a big blob, a wall of text that isn't interesting to read. Nobody's going to wade through it unless they're really already invested in you and your work. They're not going to wade through a big blob of text. So this is where you really have to hone your copywriting, which is different than creative writing and which is different than professional writing. It's writing for interest with as few words as possible in a really big, strong hook for your first sentence in 8 words or less. And then when you're talking copywriting, leaving a space in between sentences is just as important as what you write in the sentence. So for example, you want your strong, powerful hook to be your first sentence, 8 words or less, so that people can skim it, so they don't have to get real deep. And the point of that short, hooky sentence is to get people to keep reading. But you want to make it really easy for their eyeballs, really easy for their brains. So you leave a space after that first sentence, and then you write maybe 2 sentences. And so they're also interesting. They can be longer or shorter in length. And then you leave another space. And so the purpose is just that waterfall effect, the first sentence to read the second sentence to read a third. Joseph Sugarman is the daddy of copywriting. He's got some really great books for sale if you really want to learn more about copywriting. But having a really good book description and really good copywriting there can make the difference between people staying on your book page long enough to want to buy your book and having a quick skim and clicking at one of the hundreds of things that are on that book page that can take their attention in just a second.
That's great advice. I really like that white space, because as we know, the digital world is so noisy. So having your hook there and your white space will attract people, because we have such a short window to see if they're interested or not. Lovely. Now, you did mention before about students. So obviously you have some sort of course that you run.
I do. So I actually focus on children's authors for the most part, because my books are for kids. So I mentioned I was a kindergarten teacher, and so my books are geared for 4 to 5-year-olds. And there is quite a few courses for novelists and for people who write for adults, but there's not very much out there for children's authors. So that was my motivation to create my programs. But, I do have some children's authors that use that book as the beginning of their funnel for their business. So just as an example, there's one mom who is a food and allergy consultant and advocate. Her daughter had some really severe allergies and GI issues that they had to discover when she was a baby. And so for a while, she had a feeding tube. The mom wrote a book about a little girl who has a feeding tube, and it's to normalize it and for people to learn what it means and what it does and to be okay with it when they see someone. So it's a fantastic resource for parents, for teachers, for doctors, for anybody who's, in that situation. She also does consulting, and she has some courses and things. So she's incorporated the book. It's a great resource on its own, but she's also really incorporated it into her business.
That's great. I like that. And also that might be a good stepping stone for people who start off with possibly a children's book for something they know and then step into other areas. So this has been great, Laurie. You've given us lots of pearls of wisdom, which I will put in the show notes. So now we're down to the final 5. So I ask all my podcast guests 5 final questions. So are you game?
I'm game.
What is the best advice given to you by a mentor?
Do the thing. I'll expand. A lot of people have many, many dreams, lots of items on their bucket list, and they spend their lives thinking about whatever their thing is. And so the best advice to me was, actually do your thing.
I love that. Previous guest actually said exactly the same, just do it. So I think
really?
That's becoming a common topic. We do spend a lot of time procrastinating. What is the biggest help that you've received since starting your business?
It's kind of surprising because it is, I guess, but the biggest help is a Facebook group. I discovered it about 4 years ago, and it's a group of indie authors for the sake of learning to market and sell books. And that's it. And the moderators have made it such a safe space, a non-spammy, non-salesy, fantastic space. I think there's over 30,000 people in the Facebook group. Everything you ever needed to know about self-publishing is in that group, freely given. You just need to spend the time and the energy going through the posts.
Well, that's great. With what we're talking about, we can link that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give that. Anybody listening, it's called 20, so 20 books, 2 TO 50 50K.
That's great. What is the one thing that you have to do every day, your non-negotiable?
I think it would have to be sappy and silly, but cuddle with my kids. Is it okay if it's not a business thing?
That is absolutely perfect. And once again, we've had that before too. That's really important. Cuddle with the kids and cuddle with the significant other half. So perfect.
Oh, yeah, I should have said that. Yeah, those touch points to remind me of why I do what I do.
What is your favorite business book and why?
My favorite business book is called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, and it's about developing a money system. So there's a few different money systems out there in the world, but this book is really easy to read. He's a great writer. He makes you keep reading page after page. And before him, I was horrible with money, but it didn't seem like it mattered because I wasn't really making much money. But when I read the book, I put his system into place, and then the day that I started making money, I didn't start blowing it all because I used his strategies and his systems, and I shudder to think of where I would be if I hadn't read that book.
Yes, he's very good at making sure that we actually pay ourselves first. So I really do like his books as well. And his mission is to stop entrepreneurial poverty. So all these small business people that are not actually paying themselves. A great book and a great read. And now he has several. So he's just released Clockwork as well, which is about scaling your business. So I guess that's the next step.
Yes.
And our final question is, what do you wish you had known when you started out?
This is a tough one because everything that I've learned, has been very purposeful and has helped me to grow. But if I was to share one thing that would help others, I think that copywriting piece, in regards to books, there is a huge difference between writing your books and then promoting your books. And so copywriting really comes into play with the book description, but also, for example, your social media posts and your blog posts and things like that. It's a really powerful tool to write in an interesting way that will keep people's attention. I think if I could go back and start writing like that a few years earlier, that would have helped for sure.
Having 10 books to your name and ones that sell exceptionally well, then maybe you could have shortened that curve a bit. So if we could help shorten some of our listeners' curves, that would be absolutely wonderful, because as we know, writing for social media and blogs and that sort of thing is a much quicker time frame. So people don't have the luxury of sitting down with a cuppa and half an hour and really digesting that information. This has been fantastic, Laurie. Really appreciate your words of wisdom. If people would like to get in contact with you, whether it's a children's book or anything else that you're doing, how do they get in contact with you?
Sure. My website is lauriewriter.com. My courses are at creativewriter.com. And my email, you can email me at info@lauriewriter.com.
Wonderful. And we'll put all of those in the show notes, as well as the Facebook group that you mentioned. That sounds like a very good resource for people trying to start out. Wonderful. Really appreciate your time, Laurie. Thanks for reaching out at the end of your day and the beginning of my day.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Cathy.
Don't forget to subscribe to Small Business Talk podcast and head on over to smallbusinestalk.com.au/downloads for all the show notes and links to this episode. Remember, to be great, you must start. Pick one tip from today's episode, take action and implement it. Let's meet again next week at the same time and place. Until then, take action. And SBT community, enjoy your journey.